Yes, welcome everyone here to the Smash Port Show right here on Smash FM here on a Monday here in Melbourne. Of course, let's go up and continue our trip up to Queensland in particular. And of course, we go to Brisbane in particular. Of course, not far where we were actually when we headed into Springwood a moment ago. We move a little bit further north to Brisbane. And of course, we've got a very special guest on the show. We actually had her on the show earlier this year. Back in around April, May, of course, but of course it's great to see her back on the show as well, especially up there in Queensland. Of course, she's the paracyclist there. Of course, her name's Em. She joins us right now. Thanks, Em, for joining us.
No problem, Will, anytime.
Since we last had you on the show about almost 6 months ago now, I guess tell us what have you been doing to sort of, hopefully get ready for, I guess, your next events or competition coming up, especially your ultimate goal coming up next year.
Yep, it's all been going relatively well. I have continued to train. I haven't had really any time off the bike since we last spoke, just a day here or there, but no scheduled breaks yet. I have track nationals coming up in December up here, luckily for me, towards the end of December, which is a bit of a targeted event. And then we have road nationals in February next year. We have another track nationals in March. And then obviously Tokyo is the ultimate aim for next year and hoping to go for 2 gold medals there. So it's all going okay so far. I've had a fairly big transition just recently moving from Adelaide up to Queensland. So that took a bit of time and a bit of getting used to, just in terms of the change in the climate. And I've started a coaching job up here with Brisbane Grammar, so in rowing. So the early mornings have been another adjustment to throw it into the mix, but getting used to it now and finally finding my feet a little bit, but also looking forward to the summer holidays.
Now, you mentioned, of course, you moved from Adelaide, which is the home of cycling in Australia, up to Brisbane. I guess, was it a pretty tough decision to move away from Adelaide and obviously where the Australian cycling team obviously is based, to go up to Queensland?
I mean, it was and it wasn't. I really wanted to go back to work. Initially, my plan after Tokyo had been to do a year of teaching. And then with the delay, I had to reassess where I was at and what I really wanted to do now that I lost that year effectively. And, I've already taken a year and a half away from work to dedicate myself to my aims for next year now. But at the time it was supposed to be this year. And that had been a very big commitment for me. And it was a big deal. I'm someone who really likes to work and needs to work. It's a big part of my identity. And, I was a teacher, so I wanted to start, have an impact on kids. That's the reason why I became a teacher. So I've missed it, and I really, really wanted to do something, but I knew that teaching probably wasn't a viable option given the time commitments and my capacity and my health in terms of staying well when you're trapped in a room with teenagers. Illness travels quite quickly. So an opportunity came up here with Brisbane Grammar in the rowing program and to do some coach development work, and it just seemed like too good of an opportunity to turn down. I really love working in school rowing programs. I feel like you can have a really big impact on the students, and in my role I get to also have a really big impact on the coaches. So it sort of felt like I couldn't say no to it when it came up. So it was hard to leave the Cycling Australia environment in some ways, but I'm really lucky that I've landed in a really strong cycling community up here and have, enormous support from Cycling Australia, from the Victorian Institute of Sport, and now the QAS as well, have been really accommodating and welcoming, and Cycling Queensland. So it's been such a positive move really in so many ways. So any hardship that I might have felt in terms of making the decision initially, I've been rewarded for that with the way that I've been accepted and embraced up here.
Now, you mentioned obviously the VIS, which is down here in Melbourne.
Yep.
Now, I guess the question I want to ask you is there any point now, considering Melbourne's got its bit of freedom back in these past couple of weeks, is there something you want to hopefully return back to Melbourne again?
I definitely want to come back, like, to visit for sure. Like, I love Melbourne and all my family and friends are down there. So I definitely, and I miss it. Like, this is the longest, even though I lived overseas for 3 years, this is the longest I've been not without a return visit. So I haven't been home since the first week in February this year. So I'm really hopeful that I can go home for Christmas. I really, really miss my friends, my family. I'd love to be able to celebrate Christmas with them. But, in the big scheme of everything that's gone on in the world this year, it's a small sacrifice. But I still have enormous support from the VIS. So Harry Brennan, who's the head of physical preparation at the VIS, he's heavily involved in my gym programming and overall conditioning. And Shane Kelly, I'm still in touch with him as one of the lead cycling coaches and someone who's been involved with me from the moment I took my first pedal stroke on a bike, as when we started this journey. So I'm still heavily connected with the VIS, and I'm really proud to say that I'm a VIS scholarship holder, and it's always meant a lot to me to be a VIS scholarship holder. So, just because I'm living, whether it was in Adelaide or now up here in Brisbane, I really value that affiliation and association, and I feel really lucky to have the support of some really fantastic people from the VIS.
Now, you mentioned that you're obviously a rowing coach there in Brisbane Grammar. Obviously, that's a completely different sport to cycling. Obviously, I guess there's huge differences between the two sports, but do you see some similarities between the two sports that you can relate to in regards to coaching side of things?
Oh yeah, for sure. So my background, I was a rower at school and then did a bit of rowing after school, but have worked in school rowing programs a lot of my life. So that's why the rowing fits in for me, and that's sort of how I developed the physiology, I guess. Or the physiology was obviously there for cycling, but assisted by the training I had always done for rowing. And so the physiology is very similar. It's strength endurance, but also just in terms of the mentality. I think that all sports are similar in some way. And so for me, and the way that I teach and coach, it's around being resilient and having a positive mindset and making sure you're maximizing your sessions. Not every training session, it doesn't matter if you're a 13-year-old male athlete trying to be a rower, or if you're an elite paracyclist at the age of 40, not every training session that you do is going to be amazing. There's going to be days where it feels terrible and you're not hitting the mark, and you've just got choices to make it in every moment in one of those sessions where things aren't going quite so well. You can either throw it away and lose the entire session and waste it, or you can just do your best and really just try and get something out of it. So in those ways, it's similar. And even I often use cycling analogies for, for the students in terms of what I'm trying to get them to do in the boat. So, there is some crossover, although sometimes I feel like I'm clutching at straws a little bit to try and bring the two together. But so far it's been appreciated, and I think the boys have really enjoyed having someone in the program who is currently still a high-level athlete.
I know that you're a paracyclist, but was there any point, and you mentioned that you also used to be a rower as well, was there any point that you wanted to sort of stay in rowing instead of moving on to cycling?
Yeah, I couldn't physically do it. My hands, I wouldn't be able to hold on to an oar because my hands are so dysfunctional, and just the way my impairment plays out, rowing just wouldn't be a viable option for me. Cycling is literally the only sport that I can do. And so it's just lucky that I'm good at it as well. So I lucked out in the physiology and the genetics department for the sport that I am still capable, the one and only sport I'm still capable of participating in.
Now, I know right at the start you mentioned that you're on track to get to your ultimate goal, which is Tokyo in 2021. I guess, and you mentioned that obviously track nationals is in Brisbane this year. Obviously, I think normally is in Melbourne because of what's happened down here. That hasn't happened, but obviously road is, I think, still down here in Victoria again. What is your goals for track and road?
Well, track nationals, it's just to really put in some really strong performances in all of the events that I really enjoy and love. So I love the 500, and whilst in my spirit I'm a sprinter, I have such a slow fast lap, I can never really nail that the way I would love to. But I would like to get a PB in that event, and the same with the IP really. Like if I was able to set like a new world record and which would be a PB, that would be amazing. But I haven't really thought too much about what we're aiming for yet in December. For me, it's all been based around targets that we've set for Tokyo. So we'll sort of see what happens closer to that time. And whatever happens in December is a bit of a bonus, really. It's about putting out a strong performance, making sure we're at where we think we should be at this point in the preparation. And Road Nationals is sort of similar in many ways. Like it's a little bit later now. They've announced Oz Cycling announced last week that it's been delayed until I think it's the first weekend in February. Still to be in Ballarat, which is so fantastic for that community that is so supportive of that event. And yes, our track nationals, the Paracycling track nationals, was supposed to be in Melbourne and has been moved up to Brisbane to be included with the able-bod track nationals, which is like a really positive byproduct of the situation, that it is going to be a fully inclusive event, and you know they'll get to see us race and we get to see them, so that's really fantastic as well. But in terms of aims and objectives, it's just about putting out my best possible performance on that day, and just to really see and just double check that we are where we think we are with regards to outcomes and objectives for Tokyo.
Now, for everyone out there who have no idea, I guess the training and how long you train in the lead up to a major event like the Paralympics. I guess just tell us, how many hours per day do you train? How many days per week do you train? And is it just absolutely full on for everyone out there who have no idea what elite athletes go through?
Yeah, I mean, it's pretty full on, especially for someone who also has a neurological condition. So I can't do the same sort of volume as some of the people I compete against because of my condition. So fatigue, something that really needs to be carefully managed and closely managed. And I'm really lucky that, you know, I've got a really fantastic coach in Nick Formosa who is able to manage that really, really well for me. Harry Brennan from VIS, who I spoke about earlier, he's also always sort of taken great interest and taken great care to make sure that I'm not overloaded too much coming into big comps. And because it's even complicated further because I do both track and road, whereas normally people would only specialise for one. You know, able-bods in particular specialise for one of those disciplines. For a games, they won't generally be crossing over from road to track or track to road. So it's a really fine balancing act for me. I do between, I don't know, like 15 to 20 odd hours a week of training. And, you know, like today's been a pretty full on day. I had 2.5 hours on the bike and then 2 hours in the gym today. So that's probably my biggest day of training in the week. Some days I do 2 hours. Like tomorrow I've just got track and that's like a 3 or 4 hour session. So it just depends. But yeah, it's a lot and it's a massive commitment and it takes an enormous amount of dedication and a certain amount of selfishness as well to do it because you can't compromise. You know, that's one of the really big challenges that all athletes face. I don't think I'm an overly selfish person. I hope I wouldn't be considered to be super selfish. But when it comes to my sport, I'm learning that that's something I do need to be a little bit more of to make sure that I don't put myself in a compromised position in terms of my health, which would then compromise, obviously, my performance.
Now, we'll finish off with 3 final questions. The first one I want to ask you is, obviously, in the lead up to Tokyo, and obviously with the jam-packed schedule that you'll have leading up to it, are you going to have any time at all to spend with friends and family? And I'm assuming, are you going to get at least Christmas and New Year off?
Yeah, I imagine like there'll be a little bit of time off after track nationals. Maybe might get a week or something of either off completely or definitely lower intensity for a little while. Knowing that we've still obviously got road nationals in February coming up. And then maybe after that, there might be another small break. But, you know, as I say, like, we're really lucky that we're supported by such a great team of staff and support staff who always make sure that we do schedule time off, because it is so all encompassing as a general rule. Like, you need to have a break mentally as well as physically to be able to perform at those really high highs. So it's important to make sure that they are scheduled, and I know that they definitely will be by Nick and the team at Cycling Australia. So
a two-part question I want to ask you, obviously, which I actually didn't ask this question when I had you on the show early in the year. Now, you might as well tell us, and you mentioned a little bit about it throughout this interview. Obviously, what disability do you have, if you don't mind me asking? And number two, I guess, how do you adapt to it, and how has the coaches tried to adapt to it?
Yeah, like, I definitely don't mind you asking. I have multiple sclerosis, which creates disability for me across all 4 limbs. So my left side is generally affected far worse than my right in recent years. But I have weakness across all 4 limbs, and a bit more considerable dysfunction across the way that my left side tends to operate. My left leg in particular and my left arm don't really work super well. Like, you'll see when you watch, if you were to watch me on the track as opposed to watching a number of the people I compete against, or even like an able-bodied athlete, you'll see that I sit down very early out of the start gate, and it's because I can't really control the front of the bike out of the saddle, and you'll never see me out of the saddle pretty much in a road time trial or road race, because I just physically can't control the bike because of the stuff that goes on with my legs and my hands. And then fatigue's obviously a big issue. I have issues with heat. I have lots of numbness and tingling and sensory sort of disruptions throughout my body. I have nerve pain. Like, there's a whole gamut of really wonderful things that I have to deal with, and my poor coaches have to work around. But I've been pretty lucky so far, you know, in terms of the coaches that I have been able to work with, that they've always been really considerate and really taken the time as a general rule to know what's going on with me and sort of respond accordingly. You know, started with Shane and Matt Ryan back in the day, back in 2015, and moved through to Cam Jennings in Adelaide, and now Nick Formosa in Queensland. Like, and Harry has been there pretty much all the way through. So I'm really lucky that I've always been around people who've taken such great care when it's come to putting together a program for me. And, you know, we have great support staff with Karen Faulkner from Cycling Australia, who has gone out of her way to come up with some adaptations for the bike leading into Tokyo to hopefully help with my grip, because I've come off a couple of times where my hands have just let go because I don't have great grip strength. And so we're like, there's a whole lot of stuff that sort of goes on in the background that people don't necessarily see or understand, because if you saw me walking down the street, I almost guarantee you wouldn't be able to pick what was wrong with me. You know, but there is a lot of dysfunction here that does need to be worked around, and I'm just lucky that, you know, we do have really great staff in the paracycling team at Cycling Australia and the VIS and our QAS, who are really working hard to make sure that we maximise possible performance.
Now we'll finish off with another two-part question. Firstly, for everyone that should get involved in cycling or in paracycling for that matter, what would be your advice to get out there and get involved, especially now we're in summer at the moment? And of course, the second part of that question is for everyone that should follow your journey to that Tokyo Games in 2021 on the socials, how can they go about it?
Sure. So I'll start with the first part. So like for me, paracycling has been such a gift for me. You know, like I was 115 kilos when I started on the bike because I was physically unable to do anything else. And, you know, prior to being diagnosed with MS, I had always been super fit, super healthy, like really like I wasn't like an elite athlete as a rower, but I always sort of performed like one in training. Do you know what I mean? Like I'd like to train as hard as I could and push myself as hard as I could. So going from someone who was always like that to not being able to do anything for a really long period of time and be on really high doses of steroids to try and just get my body back under control, you know, and to start at such a like in a body that did not feel like my own. This sport has just given me so much. And I just would hope that anyone who is even considering, who's either got a neurological impairment or a physical impairment, or an acquired impairment, or something they were born with, and they're considering doing para sport, like I could only encourage you, like 100% give it a go. Like you will never regret trying it. The worst that can happen is that it doesn't work for you. You know, so get in touch with your state organisation, whether that's, if it's for cycling, get in touch with Cycling Victoria. If it's for, you know, rowing, get in touch with Rowing Victoria. All of these sports generally have a para arm that would be able to support you in terms of inducting you into the sport in some way, shape or form. So that would be that part of the question. And in terms of if anyone wanted to follow me, yes, I have an Instagram, which is just m_cycling, m_Petricola_cycling Instagram, and it's just Petricola Paracyclist, I think, is my Facebook page. So you can follow me on any of those.
Well, and thank you so much again for joining us on the show. We love having you on the show the first time, and of course that's why we got you back again the second time. And obviously to see how you're traveling. Hopefully we'll get another chance to have get you back on the show next year sometime. Maybe not so close to Tokyo.
Yeah, not too close.
But either way, hopefully we'll get a chance to have you on the show again to just to check in and see how you're traveling. And hopefully we can't wait to follow your journey into 2021 and obviously in the Tokyo Games. And hopefully we can see those 2 Paralympic medals coming your way by almost this time next year.
Yeah, let's hope. Thanks, Will. I appreciate the support.
No worries. And that's Em there joining us there, of course, the Australian Paracyclist there. Of course, if you want to follow her journey as well, of course, as she mentioned, you can follow on Facebook and on Insta. Of course, we'll put all the details up on how you can go about following her journey. There's more on the Smash Sports Show right after this. Don't go away here on the Monday edition.